Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are, we're wading into something pretty thick, very sticky.
Oh, yeah, it's a heavy one today.
It really is. I want you to just picture a canal in London. And not the postcard version, not the nice cafes and the tourists waving from those painted narrow boats.
No, definitely not that part of town.
Right. We're talking about the Regent's Canal, specifically a stretch that's actually nicknamed Rotten Row.
Which tells you pretty much everything you need to know.
Exactly. It is murky, it smells of stagnant water and just old secrets, and bobbing right there in the middle of it is this rusty, peeling houseboat.
It sets a very specific mood, doesn't it? You can almost
Yeah.
feel the dampness just rising right off the pages of the source material.
You really can, and inside that houseboat, a young man named Daniel Deeney has been brutally murdered. Now, usually when we open a file like this for a deep dive, we are bracing for a high-speed chase. We're looking for a frantic killer fleeing the scene. But what really hooked me about the research here on Paula Hawkins' slow fire burning is that the atmosphere isn't frantic at all.
Not even a little bit.
The source material describes it as ominous. It's heavy.
Well, that's the key distinction to make right up front. The title itself, A Slow Fire Burning, is actually your first major clue. It is not an explosion. It's not a gunshot.
Right, it's a slow burn.
It's a slow chemical reaction. We aren't here today to do a standard whodunit. If you are tuning in looking for fingerprints and, DNA analysis, you are probably in the wrong place. The mission for this deep dive is really to look at the why unit.
Which, frankly, I think is infinitely more interesting.
Oh, absolutely. Because the sources we are analyzing today, they don't just look at the physical crime scene. They dissect the decades of psychological rot that made the crime scene basically inevitable.
Decades of it.
Yeah, we are looking at a very specific ecosystem of characters, mostly women who have been completely left behind by society, and one man who seems to be just pulling all their strings.
Right. And the central thesis of the analysis seems to be about the actual nature of trauma. It's not just the idea of something bad happened to me. It's how trauma actually mutates if you leave it totally alone for 20 years.
Exactly. It's the difference between a clean break and a bone that heals wrong. The research suggests that the violence we end up seeing on that houseboat, it didn't come from a sudden snap of rage. It came from resentment.
Shimmering resentment.
Resentment that had been left unattended for decades. It's a deep look at what happens when you let profound wounds fester.
So let's start peeling back the layers of this slow fire. The sources introduce us to this lineup of suspects, and honestly, if I saw the first one walking toward me on the street, I would probably cross to the other side.
Oh, you mean Laura?
Let's talk about Laura Kilbride.
Laura is really the low-hanging fruit for the police in this scenario, isn't she?
Completely. The material describes her as difficult, unpredictable, having this absolute hair-trigger temper. She is the person making a scene in the coffee shop, the one who looks disheveled and aggressive. Society essentially looks at Laura and just sees danger.
But this is where the source material gets so fascinating. If we stop at that surface perception, which, by the way, is exactly what the police in the story do, we completely miss the medical reality.
Right, the accident.
The source reveals this critical piece of her history. When Laura was 10 years old, she was the victim of a hit-and-run accident.
And we are not talking about a broken leg here.
No, not at all. She suffered a severe traumatic brain injury, specifically damage to her frontal lobe.
Which changes everything.
It does. Now, without getting too bogged down in the neurology of it all, the frontal lobe is essentially your brain's braking system. It is the CEO of your personality. It handles impulse control, social filtering, emotional regulation.
Okay, so when I get really annoyed at a slow walker on the sidewalk, my frontal lobe chimes in and says, hey, don't scream at them in public. That's weird.
Precisely. You have a filter. Laura's filter was physically smashed when she was a child. And this is a really crucial distinction that the source makes. Laura's quote-unquote bad behavior isn't a character flaw.
It's a disability.
Yes. She literally lacks the neurological hardware to inhibit her rage. She feels an emotion, and it just comes out.
That really reframes the whole narrative of her being a bad person. She is fighting her own biology every single day. But the tragedy doesn't even stop at the physical accident, does it? The research points out that her injury destroyed her relationship with her parents.
That is the social reality layered right on top of the medical one. Her mother simply couldn't cope. You have to imagine you have a sweet 10-year-old girl, and suddenly overnight she becomes erratic, aggressive, difficult.
And instead of support, Laura got distance.
Exactly. She grew up feeling like a walking disappointment to the people who were supposed to love her.
And that profound isolation leads to one of the most poignant details in the entire profile, the bar of soap.
Ah, yes. The soap.
There is a note here in the analysis that Laura carries a heavy bar of soap inside a sock in her bag. Now, when I first read that, I thought, okay, that is a makeshift weapon. It sounds super aggressive.
It sounds like something you would see in a gritty prison drama.
Right.
But look at the psychological context the source provides us. Laura does not carry it because she is out hunting for a fight. She carries it because she is terrified.
Because she knows she's vulnerable.
She knows she cannot navigate social situations normally. And she knows from experience that the world is incredibly hostile to her.
So it is not a weapon of offense at all.
No. That soap is a talisman of safety for someone who has literally forgotten what safety feels like. It is a tragic little detail that shows just how scary the world looks through her eyes.
That flips the script entirely. She's not the hunter. She feels like the prey. And that brings us directly to the victim, Daniel Deeney. Because Laura actually knew him. They had a relationship.
Relationship might be a bit too strong of a word. The source describes it beautifully and tragically as two broken people crashing into each other in the dark.
Wow, that is a bleak image.
It really is. It was not a romance. It was a collision. Daniel was struggling, Laura was struggling, and they found this momentary, messy connection. But because they were both so deeply damaged, it couldn't be a support system.
It was just two people drowning near each other.
Exactly.
It seems like Daniel was drawn to broken things, or maybe he just couldn't escape them. So we have Laura, the prime suspect, with the brain injury, and the soap, who was seen with the victim. It is very easy to see why the cops like her for the murder.
Yeah.
But she is not the only one on that canal. We need to talk about the neighbor, Miriam.
Ah, Miriam. If Laura plays the role of the suspect, Miriam definitely plays the role of the witness. She is the woman living on the houseboat right next door.
We all know a Miriam, the curtain twitcher, the neighbor who knows exactly what time you came home last night and exactly who you were with.
On the surface, yes. She is the classic nosy neighbor trope. But again, the source warns us not to trust the surface. Miriam isn't just bored. Her hypervigilance actually comes from a place of massive trauma.
This part of the research actually made me shiver a bit. Miriam was abducted years ago.
Yes. Decades ago, she was the victim of a very notorious abduction case. She survived, but her life was effectively stolen from her. And this brings us to one of the most compelling insights in this entire deep dive, the concept of trauma appropriation.
This involves Theo Meyerson, right? The victim's uncle.
Correct. Theo Meyerson is a famous, wealthy author. And how did he get so famous? He wrote a book, a thriller that detailed with gruesome precision the abduction and the torture that Miriam actually lived through.
Wait, so he used her actual real-life trauma without her permission?
He changed the names just enough to avoid a direct lawsuit, but everyone knew. He took the absolute worst moments of her life, her physical and psychological torture, and he packaged it up as entertainment for the masses.
That is parasitic. There is really no other word for it.
It is a profound violation. Think about the power dynamic there. Theo gets the accolades, the bestseller status, the money, the beautiful house, and Miriam gets nothing.
She just stays in the shadows on a rusty boat.
Carrying the PTSD while he strips her lived experience for spare parts to build his career.
It is almost like he stole her soul to build his own life.
That is a very accurate way to put it. And this perfectly explains Miriam's behavior on the canal. The source calls her a secret collector. She isn't watching Daniel and Laura just because she is a gossip. She is actively gathering currency.
Currency, like she's going to buy something with it.
Information is literally the only power she has left in the world. She views every secret she learns, every inconsistency she spots in this murder case as something she can trade. She deeply believes the world owes her.
And specifically, she believes Theo owes her.
Exactly. It's a form of transactional revenge. You stole my story, so I am going to steal yours. Or I am going to hold the truth of this murder hostage until you finally pay up.
She wants to level the playing field.
She's not interested in legal justice. She wants some moral repayment for the theft of her life.
It's amazing how this theme of debt keeps popping up in the analysis. Everyone in this story feels owed something. And speaking of debts and broken bonds, we have to look at the family itself. The victim Daniel didn't just appear out of a vacuum. He came from a family that was already shattered long before he died on that boat.
We need to talk about the sisters. Carla, who is Daniel's mother, and Angela, his aunt. This is where the source material really digs into the idea of intergenerational trauma.
Now, these two sisters used to be incredibly close, right? But something completely severed that bond.
A tragedy that is almost too painful to even articulate. Years ago, Carla's first child, a toddler, died.
And he died while under Angela's care.
Yes. A momentary lapse in supervision, and the child fell. It was an accident, but the weight of that, it completely crushed them both.
I cannot even imagine. How do you look your sister in the eye after something like that? How do you even begin to forgive?
The source suggests that you don't. You just survive. And their survival mechanisms are fascinatingly different. The research uses this brilliant metaphor of glass and bottles to describe them.
Glass and bottles. Unpack that for me.
So Carla, the mother, lives in a house of glass. She married Theo, the author, and she built this life of extreme fragility and transparency. She tries to be absolutely perfect. She tries to look like she has completely moved on. It is all sharp edges and clear surfaces.
She is trying to freeze time almost. Like if everything is visually perfect, maybe the pain won't come back.
Exactly. And then on the other side, you have Angela. Angela retreated into a house of bottles. She drank. She drowned the overwhelming guilt in alcohol. She became the quote-unquote mess of the family, while Carla became the statue.
And stuck right in the dead center of this freeze-out is Daniel.
The replacement child, in a way. Or at least the child who came after the tragedy. Daniel wasn't just a guy who ended up on a boat. He was growing up in the direct crossfire of this massive, unresolved grief.
Just absorbing it all.
On one side, he had his mother's frantic need for perfection and her hidden resentment. On the other, he had his aunt's crushing guilt and chronic alcoholism.
It's like he never had a chance to just be Daniel. He was always functioning as a reaction to the dead brother he never even met.
That is the textbook definition of intergenerational trauma. He was being shaped by a ghost. The slow fire was burning him from the exact moment he was born. He was just absorbing all that heat from his mother and his aunt.
It is devastating to think about. He was essentially completely alone in a room full of people. Now, we have circled around him a few times, but we really need to put the spotlight squarely on the man who seems to be the common denominator in all this misery, Theo Meyerson.
The architect.
We know he stole Miriam's story. We know he is Carla's husband. We know he is a massively successful writer. But the psychological profile the source gives on him is just chilling. He isn't physically violent, is he?
No, and that is exactly what makes him so dangerous. He is not a brute. He is a psychological vampire. The source suggests that Theo views people not as actual human beings with agency, but simply as material.
They're just rough drafts for his next chapter.
Precisely. We saw it clearly with Miriam, taking her profound pain for his plot. But he does it to his own family, too. He keeps his wife Carla in that brittle house of glass because her fragility feeds his ego. He manipulates Angela's guilt. He seems to actually thrive on the instability of the women around him.
There is a great phrase in the notes here, the oxygen that keeps the fire burning.
That is Theo. If the trauma and the resentment are the fuel, Theo is the one quietly fanning the flames. He gaslights them. He actively pits them against each other.
Well, why? Just for control.
Because happy, stable people do not make for good literature. He needs drama. He needs pain to write.
So he effectively manufactures human misery so he can sell it at a bookstore.
It is a totally malignant, symbiotic relationship. He is rich and successful specifically because the women around him are broken. If they healed, he would lose his muse.
That is a terrifying thought. It really makes you wonder who the actual villain is here. Is it the person who eventually snaps and stabs someone? Or is it the person who spent 20 years carefully removing all the safety rails until someone finally fell?
That right there is the central moral question of this deep dive. The legal system just wants the stabber. But the psychological analysis points the finger directly at the architect.
It's pretty bleak. A canal full of broken people just using and manipulating each other. But, and I'm really glad the source material included this, there is one exception. There is one character who does not fit this pattern of transaction and debt.
Irene.
She is the elderly woman living next to Laura, right?
Yes. In a narrative completely filled with people calculating exactly what they are owed, Irene offers what the source calls pure kindness.
Which almost feels suspicious in this setting. You spend the whole time waiting for her angle. Like, what does she actually want?
But she doesn't have one. And her connection with Laura is incredibly significant. Remember, everyone else sees Laura as a monster or, at best, a nuisance. Irene just sees a person.
Why is that? What does Irene see that the police and the neighbors miss?
Irene understands what it means to be invisible. She is elderly. Society has largely written her off just as it has written Laura off. They are both discards.
So it is a solidarity of the overlooked.
Exactly. Irene doesn't want Laura's story.
Yeah.
She doesn't want to fix her or use her as material. She just offers companionship without any conditions. It is the only relationship in the entire analysis that isn't transactional.
It's like a control group in a scientific experiment. Irene shows us that genuine connection is possible, which makes the failure of everyone else, Theo, Miriam, Carla, even more stark.
It highlights that the toxicity wasn't inevitable. It was a choice. Irene chooses kindness, while the others continuously choose resentment.
So let's try to synthesize all of this. We started with a dead body on a rusty boat, but what we have actually found is a web. We have a woman with a brain injury who literally cannot filter her rage, a neighbor whose trauma was stolen for profit, two sisters broken by the accidental death of a child, and a man who treats them all like puppets.
When you lay it out like that, the murder of Daniel Deeney feels a lot less like a specific isolated crime and much more like a systemic collapse.
The London depicted in the source material isn't dangerous because of gangs or muggers. It is dangerous because every single relationship is a transaction of pain. Everyone is keeping a tally.
You hurt me, so I am owed this. You took this from me, so I will take that from you.
Oh,
It is a zero-sum game of emotional economics.
and that brings us right back to the title, a slow fire burning.
The murder itself, you have to think of that as just the moment the fire finally caught the drapes. But the house had been filling with smoke for 20 years. It started with the hit and run. It started with the abduction. It started with the toddler falling. The fuel was just piling up layer by layer.
It really challenges the way we consume true crime, or even crime fiction, doesn't it? We always want the neat solution. We want the handcuffs and the court date. But this analysis suggests that by the time that handcuffs come out, the real tragedy has already happened.
And it suggests that the culprit is just the person who happened to be holding the match when the room finally ignited.
That is the thought I want to leave you with today. The police in this story, and frankly in real life, are trained to find the hand that held the knife. But based on everything we have unpacked today, the gaslighting, the theft of trauma, the abandonment, the source forces us to ask a much harder question.
In a system built entirely on long-term trauma, is culpability ever really a single point?
Exactly. Only one person may have technically killed Daniel. But when you look at the betrayal, the secrets, and the years of manipulation, didn't everyone have a reason to strike the match? And in a way, aren't they all responsible for the fire?
It's definitely a question that lingers long after you close the book.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today. We will catch you next time. Keep exploring and stay curious.